Good evening. We seem to be live. I'm checking my other phone for the chat now. Okay, come on.
Well, where's everybody?
Well, she's usually late.
Yeah, Kelly's coming, but she's going to be late. Good evening and welcome. And with my other iPhone, I have the chat available so I can see what everyone is saying. So welcome tonight. We're here at Sammy's Italian Pizza Kitchen, and maybe we should show my other profile for tonight. Shall we do that?
Sure. What are you gonna do?
Show my other profile for tonight.
That was your good side over there.
I know it was my good side. That's troublesome, but anyway. Okay, we did it.
Stage right, the stage left.
Hello, welcome. Nice to see you, Penny. You're up late. And hi, Miles. Yes, get a glass of wine. It's you're behind. Yes, get a glass of wine, Penny. It'll help you sleep. Okay, let's see. All right, I think we're here. And this evening we have John, Bill, and Debbie already here, and maybe some others, but it's nice to see you all. And I just wanted to mention to the regulars that I've been asked to identify myself. So I'm Skip Conover, and I'm the founder of the Carl Jung Depth Psychology Reading Group. And this is one of our live sessions. We've been doing it for 3 years now. It'll be 3 years on June the 1st. So this will be our last session in year 3. Next time we meet in June, it'll be year 4. Can you believe that?
No, you didn't say 4, did you?
Pardon?
Did you say 4?
Yeah, it'll be the 4th year
Oh,
starting.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're
we're
have a party or something.
yeah, we're just completing year 3. So next time we can have a party and celebrate year 4. But we always have fun.
Been through a lot of life changes in those 3 years. Also,
Yeah, both of you have.
well, you've got a new home.
Well, I've got a new home, a new knee, and a new ankle in that 3-year period. So we're into lots of new things.
Albert.
Yeah,
We miss Albert.
Yeah, everybody misses Albert. That's an inside joke for those who know. And pardon? You don't know?
No, he just told me.
I just told her about it came in a dream.
Yeah, it came in a dream, and Albert was my knee.
the Nazis took him away.
Hauled him away in a truck. Never to be seen again.
Damn Nazis.
those Nazi surgeon boy.
No compassion.
Yeah. they were, anyway, so we're here, and you're getting my other profile tonight for privacy's sake. And tonight we're going to talk about a few things. First of all, I wanted to mention this book that I got, which is The Art of C.G. Jung, and it's a great book. For one of the reasons it's great from my point of view is it's always been hard to show pictures from the Red Book with the actual Red Book, since it's so unwieldy. But now, if I want to show a Red Book mandala, I can do it this way. And so I can hold it up to the, I guess I better hold it up more still, but this is a painting of C.G. Jung that appears in the Red Book. And here's a couple of others. This is Dr. Jung being pierced by something, by insight, I guess you could say that is. What would you say, John?
Well,
What's he being pierced by?
yeah, he's having a religious experience.
Religious experience, yeah, that's what it is. So he's having a religious experience. Complete with snake.
Can't do anything without your snake.
I actually saw a snake like this one. I very rarely see a poisonous snake in Maryland. Almost never, and I don't think I've ever seen an actual diamondback. But the other day, I saw one right at the intersection of RSTL and Reaver Road. Yeah, a diamondback rattlesnake, about 5 feet long. It was a big one. It was an adult. So it's probably left behind lots of babies, I suppose. And it actually was slithering across the road. I could have run it down, but I had compassion and I didn't do it. And I don't know. That's
somewhere that they've been evolving and losing their rattle.
they've been losing their
Well, they're
rattle.
not using their rattle like they used to because they get killed by humans. So they're learning to disguise the sound.
So now they use organ music.
You sure it isn't accordion music?
But I didn't run it down. I let it slither off to the side. I could have run it down. And I here, my chat phone is so loud that I'm hearing myself laugh. That's not good, so I'm going to turn this sound off. We're having fun. Did you get your wine, Miles? Okay, so the other thing I wanted to mention was for my regulars, you could help people who are non-first language English speakers by occasionally in the chat putting CC and then maybe a little summary of what it is we're talking about. So if you put CC colon and then put a little summary on, that will help people outside of Annapolis, Maryland, and outside of the U.S. understand what we're talking about, because we do have listeners, especially in Latin America, and we have playback listeners in Europe and now in Korea. So the first thing I should mention is BTS, because did you hear about BTS last time?
Briefly.
Briefly. Okay, so this has been a month of BTS for me. And the volume, just to give you a sense of the volume on the YouTube channel, on April the 4th, there had been in the previous 28 days 213,962 minutes watched. So that was on April the 4th, and 27,838 views, which was up from the previous record, which had been 21,000. The previous record had been 180,000. Okay, so this was, as of April 4th, it was up to 213,000. And as of then, it went up, and on April the 30th, it was 502,000 minutes. So 500,000 minutes in the previous 28 days. Thank you, BTS subscribers. There had been hopefully you're back. I'm operating off of Sammy's Wi-Fi, and hopefully it's continuing to work. And so anyway, it's been quite a fascinating month in terms of this BTS army because they have very much gotten into Jungian psychology. Jung's Map of the Soul, an introduction by Mary Stein, book is the basis of the new BTS album called Map of the Soul Persona. And they launched it on April the 12th, and in 4 hours it was #1 in 70 countries, 70 countries. And last Saturday, they sold out the Rose Bowl. And they practically sold out the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, and there's another stadium in Chicago that they're going to perform at.
What kind of music is it?
It's what is, well, it's BTS music, but it comes from the K-pop genre. Do you know what K-pop is? K-pop is a genre of music that was developed in Korea, and it's built around popular artists, and mostly they're, as I understand it, they're singing love songs and that sort of thing. But BTS has consistently been doing songs about mental health. And so, to their great credit, because mental health has been a taboo subject. And so they did this whole album that they dropped on April 12th called Map of the Soul Persona. And if you look on YouTube and put that name in and see the music video that was done for Map of the Soul Persona, it's really cool. Okay, and you can also look up, there's a very good, although a little bit shallow, but very good on DK TV. You can find Danny Kim and the other Kim brother, I forget his name. And I don't know why we're being interrupted, but okay. Sorry. I know I'm on my side at the moment, but I'm trying to figure out why I'm getting disconnected. We'll keep going, and hopefully all things will be resolved in the future. Okay, so one of the things that I've been talking about in the last month is Mary Stein's book that BTS came out with. And as of the 1st of April, I think that BTS was not well known in the States, especially among older people, but I may be wrong. I've been sort of adopted by the BTS Army as the grand old man of the BTS armies. And BTS Army stands for Adorable Representatives Microphone for Youth. Okay, that's what, or Master of Ceremonies for Youth, so depending on who you ask. So the armies are adorable and female. Amazing.
What was the start?
94% male.
Yeah.
In other words, over the last 3 years, I have the demographics every day.
For your channel or BTV?
For me, for
Okay.
my channel. Okay, so for my channel, over the last 3 years, and this is based on men are more up in the air spiritual, right? And so 94% spiritual.
Not on that one.
Who knows? And that also, but wait. Before April 1st, about 94% of the viewership of the YouTube channel was men. Since April 1st, 75% has been women. And I think that's I don't think it's any less men, but because of the increase.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is that an increase of viewers that are?
It's an increase of viewers that are interested in Jung,
Or that
they,
it brought women.
it brought women in. So that's not yet.
All these women.
I
There
didn't
she
hear.
is.
I didn't hear from Desiree, but I heard from Kelly, who said she was coming. So she probably will come, but sometimes she's tied up.
Oftentimes like we'll give her till 8:30 before we cross.
Okay, so going around the table, what do you want to talk about, or what are you talking about, thinking about today, if anything?
I just came to talk informally about anything.
Okay, great.
I mean, you mentioned levels of consciousness. And I tried to listen to that video. I may have gone into your live feed this morning briefly because I was looking around for it, and I found something. I don't know. I just assumed we'd talk about levels of consciousness.
Yes, we will immediately.
Young group.
Right. And Debbie or John, do you want to?
One thing I was a little curious about is, does the anima have its own animus?
Yeah.
And does the animus have its own anima?
That is a good question, but Bill says yes, and I'm not going to doubt it.
Well, in a male-female relationship, a woman, a man often, if a woman is, let's say, animus possessed, and she's very opinionated, and it's just unbelievably irritating to a male, his anima will kick in. And then, I don't know how it's done, but I've seen him talk about where a man's in the animus, in his anima mode, which is real moody and you know,
Showing affect.
yeah, he's bitchy is what he is. And he will, his animus will come out of that as if he were opinionated. So he becomes reduced down into his opinionated animus state.
As a reflection of hers? Or
Yeah, it's like you can keep going down deeper and deeper until it's just totally.
so is it a hall of mirrors where there's just
I think
that's
it is.
complete?
That would be a good way of saying it. And it just becomes totally destructive. So,
Right.
You might as well just call the lawyers if you're gonna go that route.
Yeah, we have to stop going that route.
Yeah.
That's one of my objectives of this group, is to teach people how to stop doing that route
Going to the lawyers.
and stop going to the lawyers, but learning how to mature and transform ourselves within our existing marriages where we did have love at one point at least.
Well, that's another thing I've been looking into. That's what I've been looking into most of all, is about love. And you know, in fact, one of the things I'm writing about with these two couples, and it's the young couple and the older couple, and there's the, you know, the romantic Romeo Juliet love that will have to die, and then there's the mature love, which is the one who is. See, if you do that, I get self-conscious.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll point it at John.
Extremely introverted. Some days more so than others, and you know. But in the mature love, where you begin to actually deal with one another as human beings, not as you're not in love with your own projection anymore.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, one thing that Debbie and I have found in the last month or two is that if you hug for 20 seconds a day, it makes a difference.
I bet it does.
And it really does.
Yeah.
I mean, if you hug without thinking about your day or without thinking about anything,
Yeah.
just hugging and being there for one another,
I could see
it's
that.
a huge, huge thing, and it happens unconsciously.
Yeah.
But when Debbie and I do it, I mean, I feel huge energy going between us,
Yeah, I can imagine.
and I think that that's really powerful. So, John.
Such a simple thing, and yet so important.
Right, and it needs to be at least 20 seconds, but it can be longer. But
3 minutes, 5 minutes.
whatever it is, but the point is that something unconscious happens that is ineffable. You can't explain it, but it's very powerful.
No, I understand that.
And so, you know, I just find it extremely powerful. And I wish I had known it all along, but I'm glad that I know it now. And so, 20 seconds, everybody. Okay, so let's see. Is there a gallery of, Miles asks, is there a gallery of Dr. Jung's art somewhere? And I think if you put into Google, Carl Jung Red Book art, you will get lots of images back. And they most of the ones that are in the Red Book are online. But this book contains things that aren't in the Red Book. And see if I can give you an example. Here it is. Okay. Did you see these? Okay, so these are wood carvings that Dr. Jung did, and they're very, very interesting. I'll see if I can put them up close so that you can see them. And there's one
You're
picture.
very amusing, very whimsical.
Like,
Let me just see if there's a photograph of his children next to one of these images, and it's like 4 feet high. Oh, here it is. Okay, so here he calls it Atma Victu, and there's Atma Victu, and there's his children standing next to Atma Victu.
Oh, there it is.
So it's a pretty big carving, and anyway, that's his daughters Helene and Marianne next to Atma Victu, about 1920.
What does that translate to? Do you have
I
any
have no
idea?
clue. Okay, it's some sort of god, but I don't know.
wonder if it's the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, probably is.
The pizza in a way.
Pardon?
Like a pizza on the mud.
Yep. Okay, so Shauna urges me to go back to painting, and I really want to, but whether I will have time to do it in this life, I'm not sure. And Sean says, I'm curious on what Bill thinks about the desert in the relation to Jung's work. In the Red Book, I don't know if you read it, but in the beginning of the Red Book, when he's trying to find his soul, and he drops into an active imagination, and he ends up in the desert. And what this is, I think what this is symbolic of is the fact of someone who's depressed, and so they really can't get life going, and how do they get that going? Sean, there was a image in my video earlier today that had a quote about this, and maybe I'll put that image on this video as at least as a thumbnail tonight or tomorrow. But anyway, do you have any thoughts about being in the desert, in the unconscious? I mean, So Dr. Jung had dropped into the unconscious, and he needs the anchorite, who's a kind of monk, I guess, and he had been. He said at the beginning of the Red Book, my soul, you know, I call you, do you hear me? And he waited something like a month, 30 days, trying to do that to get his soul to respond. And the soul is the creative part of the psyche, so it's the artistic part and so on. And so he was trying to get reconnected to that part of himself. And so Sean is one of my regulars, and he's an artist in his own right in music, actually. But he said he's interested in what you think about the desert in relation to Jung's work. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, I don't know about in relation to Jung's work, but personally, the desert to me, and having been to the desert, is sort of a place of incubation. Mm-hmm. It's like nothing's happening yet, but something's going to happen. And right now, I think in California, out in the desert, there's I think they get a spring rain or something. Mm-hmm. But whatever it is, suddenly there's just this bloom. It's such an explosion of flowers out in the desert that you can actually see it from space.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think of. It's just it's a place where you go. That it's that, and it's also think of the salt flats because that was the first time I ever really saw star shadows from just the star shining. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of like there's this it's a place where you can everything is stripped bare and you are just available, or you are available to receive the stars,
the bloom.
Yeah, and the bloom. The bloom is what comes after you sort of bloom is during that time you're sort of absorbing the rays of the stars or something. It's almost like and then out of that there comes the rain and the bloom. And so, metaphorically, you're just talking about there's that what is God? I'm trying to think of Jungian terms, but there's a dry spell. There's a spell where nothing's happening in the depression, and it's almost like the deeper the depression, the bigger the bloom. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
And so you have to wait. It's the period of lamentation in the Job archetype.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the phases again in the Job archetype? Contest, defeat, lamentation, rebirth. And you go through that cycle multiple times through life, and each time you go through it, you develop a stronger ego. And so I remember on my 40th birthday, I specifically remember, because I was, I thought I could walk on water based on my education. I had 10 years of college education. Typical lawyer. And suddenly I found myself unemployed, and not only unemployed, but I couldn't get a job. I was 39 years old, and everybody says you're overqualified, okay, because they want to hire some guy right out of law school who they can pay nothing to and make him work 80 hours a week. And they probably couldn't do that to me. And so I couldn't find a job for 2 years. And so on my 40th birthday, I remember I was really down, okay, because I hadn't been able to find a job. But I'd been
practicing on the recorder, believe it or not. And I'm not a real musician in any sense of the word, but I remember sitting there on the floor in the dark in our apartment, and playing Hatikva, which is, I think it's it's like the national anthem of Israel or something. It's not the national anthem, but it's a very popular Jewish song. Had learned to play that on the recorder, and so I'm playing that, and feeling very sorry for myself. And then shortly after that, I did find a job teaching, as it happens, and so, but that was a very deserty-like period for me, and I've had a few of them since then, but that was the worst one. And
my way is to paint, and I'll just start an image out of nowhere. I have no idea where it's going to go, and then as I paint and go along, I mean, Helen, you saw that painting I did. That took at least a year, it kind of eked out, and then finally it just started making what I thought was making sense. And then when I finished it, I went, wow.
That's what it's about.
That's
The
what
woman
it's
with the mirror?
Yeah.
Okay. That was a cool painting.
Yeah. And so the secret is to do something. Go do something creative. And basically the advice I was giving this morning, partially about active imagination, which was go to any shop where they offer things to create things, whatever it is. So it could be an art supply store, it could be the tool department of Sears, it can be a nursery, or it can be a kitchen supply store for somebody that's interested in cooking, right? And just start creating something, even if you're terrible at it, just do it. And when I started painting at age 45, I knew that I couldn't draw, and I never did learn to draw, but I was able to do some very profound painting over time, better. But then I said, well, I want to try to do portraits. And I mentioned this in the video this morning, that I wanted to do portraits. And the portraits were coming out and they were being too true. Okay, it was like the portrait of Dorian Gray. I could do a beautiful portrait of you, John, but you wouldn't hang it in your living room because it would be too true about something that's happening in your psyche. And the one that I've shown before is the Vietnam one, but every time I did a portrait, like I did this portrait of the executive director of Maryland Hall, and I came in on the 5th day. The custom is they would have somebody sit for 5 days, 3 hours each time, and so you would have 15 hours to do this painting. And I came in on the 5th day. That was my first day at the portrait co-op. So everybody else had a completed portrait, and I had a blank canvas. And I had one 3-hour period to do something.
Fast.
So I'm throwing paint at the canvas, and a year or so later, she said to me, that's my favorite one because it expressed exactly how I was feeling that day. But as I look at that and some other paintings which will go unmentioned, I find that they're too true. And first of all, people wouldn't pay me to do a painting like that because it would be nothing that they would want to put on the wall because they're too, in a sense, they're too painful. It's because my psyche is interacting with their psyche directly.
But what if they're a happy person and they're not having any kind of psychic issues? Then
When's the last time you had a
I think we have to have a lot more wine for that. Okay. Anyway, let let's go back here. And so Shan says, to me, the desert feels like a place where everyone is dragged into their life. I'm curious what that means about the whole God image. Okay, so do you have any comments about that? So the desert feels like a place where everyone is dragged into their life. And so I'll leave that to your comments. Good evening, Brendan.
Good evening.
We have a quorum.
Well, that's almost like saying, you know, you're manifested into the, you know, physical world somehow. You know, being dragged into the desert is like, well, this is my way of looking at it. Let's look at Persephone.
Okay.
Because I always like to go to Persephone and Demeter. So here's Demeter life, right? She gives life to everything. Well, the daughter of Persephone is raped and you know, is taken, abducted is the word. She's abducted and taken to hell. And that's what I think sort of the parallel with going to the desert is like going to hell.
Yeah.
You know, and what's significant about that is here's life, and then here's the daughter of life. And the daughter of life, which is some part of life itself, is ripped out of, you know, the wonderful world of living with, you know, mom, and pulled down into this masculine hell you know, with Hades, who manages to feed her something like a pomegranate seed or something, so that she's trapped there. And that's sort of like, well, we're born into the world, we're sort of trapped here. It's kind of ironic in a way, because you're brought into the world, and what you're left, you're standing there, and it's like you've been given this life, but it can be taken away at any time. So you live your whole life afraid that you're going to die, or you live a big part of it, especially when you're young, that you're going to die. And what a dirty trick is that?
It is a dirty trick.
So here you are living in hell, and that's sort of like the way I see, you know, that desert he's talking about, where, and what did he say, Jung's?
Well, he was, to me, the desert feels like a place everyone is dragged into their life, in their life. I'm curious what that means about the whole God image.
Then the God image, well, I don't think you can, I don't know if you, how to connect the God image to that, except, you know, I mean, you could be cynical about it. God image is the connection of Persephone to Demeter, basically, because you're embodied here in a manifest world, and then here's light itself, and then there's a connection between you and that light, and that's the God image. And so if your life in hell is, you know, it's gonna certainly affect your God image. And it's, you know, if you have any free will at all, then maybe you can affect that. If not, you live with the God image you got.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, and excuse me if I reveal any secret here, but Sean has an excellent YouTube channel in which he's doing unique and new piano pieces. And so in terms of what you're talking about, the God image would be sort of Van Cliburn, or not even Cliburn, because Cliburn
that's
is
more of a hero image.
Yeah, well, he's I'm sorry, he's the wrong guy because he's just an artist who can play the music. He's not the guy who's creating the music. And so it's more like Mozart or Chopin, who is creating the music. But they're like the God image in the sense that they're the best, and they've been recognized as the best for centuries now.
Yeah, I don't see that as a God image, but yeah.
You see that as a God image. What do you see it as?
That's more like ideals and heroes.
Yeah.
models.
Models,
You
right?
know, I
Okay.
don't think the God image is that definable.
Do you not see a connection between models and sources? I mean, it seems to me that you're saying the God image must have an intrinsic connection with reality, with the hell, whatever we're going for. But you're saying that models have in no way are reflecting. We're not reflecting models. You're saying that models are completely separate.
No, I think the God image precedes heaven and hell. I mean, it's before all. It's sort of like your basic before as a screaming baby before you say no. I mean, you're totally in the participation
Mystique, yeah.
mystique with mom. You're one.
You're robust. You're robust.
Erebos, yeah.
Yeah, but I
Ouroboros,
think
yeah.
that,
before
that's
that.
only after you've divided it. And that's only after you have to come back to something. At that point, you're so totally absorbed, there's no separation. And I think the God image is that initial, I have to go off on a lot of different metaphors.
Go ahead, because that's all we got to do it with.
Well, you know how you're born with a certain horoscope, a birth chart, right? Well, that birth chart is here you've got the pleroma, you've got the whole of everything. And then when you're born, there's a certain snapshot of the pleroma, which becomes your sort of God image. Because it's your personal moment, your personal snapshot of the pleroma. And then, so that is going to affect how you project into the world and manifest yourself, and also that reflection back to the God image. There's that play back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know.
You're talking about before, right after birth, or before birth?
Right at birth.
At birth.
Yeah, it's just a metaphor, though.
So the God image is created uniquely for you at your birth.
Yeah, everyone has their own God image.
I have to disagree. I mean, I love what you're saying about we come into space and time. So we come into pleroma, I get that. But I don't get the implied fatalism of what you just assumed that we all accept, which is we're all born with our own horoscope. I don't buy that.
Yeah, well,
I don't buy that just because we're born at a certain moment in time and circumstance, that everything is predestined for us.
well, I didn't say it was
Well,
predestined.
what's
it's
the
not,
horoscope?
it's not entirely predestined, but on the
Well,
other hand,
That's a little more explanation.
yeah, you were certainly predestined in the sense that you were born male, I presume in Great Britain, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were born in Great Britain, male, white, at a certain point in time, and so a certain number of things that happened before you were born, and, you know, very much like the rest of us men here, most of us born after the end of World War II, but all those things had happened. Okay, and so we're born at that point in time, and so coming from the pleroma, which is everything, we're sort of bound. Once we drop into life, we're bound by that point in time that we're born and the individual being that we are, right? In the sense of, you know, we are white male and born in a quote unquote free country.
I look at it in terms of two fates. You're born with the first fate is the one we were just talking about, where you're born, you have a horoscope, let's say. But a horoscope is just a metaphor, a way of talking about the fact that you're born at a specific time. And it maps out that specific time. It's like, okay, all right, it's 12:48. So that's your horoscope. No one else was born at 12:48 at that location, blah, 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 blah. So there's one fate. The other, and that's what I call your potential.
Mhm.
Then there's the other fate, the world you're born into. Now that doesn't exist yet until you separate. So when you first start out, you are your potential. But until you begin to interact with your possibilities, which is your environment, which is all the opportunities that exist, there is no, there's no separation.
Connection.
Yeah, so there is no possibilities. I mean, you might die as an infant and then you never have any possibilities. But,
Right.
So once you say no to mom, and say, no, that's, I want the other nipple. I don't know what you say. But, yeah. Or was that you? Oh, that was a kid. So once you say no and you begin to explore your opportunities out here, your possibilities, you have a mirror reflection going on. You have a back and forth going on so that you begin to evolve and individuate. And so somewhere in between this fate and that fate is free will. So it's not fatalistic.
Right. And you have to get out of Never Never Land. Okay.
I didn't know we were talking about
Peter
Michael Jackson.
Pan.
Oh.
Peter Pan, not that Neverland, but Peter Pan, where the Lost Boys didn't want to grow up.
Yeah.
And so they have to come into a time of maturity and take their responsibility in the world, to use a Jordan Peterson trope. I guess it's a trope.
So where does the God image come in with what you just said? What?
Well, that's a tough one because
That's a fate also, in a
this
way?
is the kind of thing you need to prepare for. But
Yeah.
if it's like I was talking about the horoscope, at that instant, there's a certain everything. Let's just talk planets because it's concrete and it's easy to understand. So all the planets are in a certain place. The stars are in this. You're in this whole field, of space-time, which doesn't really exist. I mean, those are constructs. But we've got this map already set up, so let's use it. So you've got this space-time configuration that exists right at the instant you're born, where you're born, and so you've got that space-time thing exists as a subset of the pleroma. The pleroma is indefinable. It exists beyond all comprehension and understanding. We reduce it down to these constructs, what we can, just to give ourselves a location, a placement, and also a point of departure, or the pole,
The walking
Stake in the
stick.
ground.
No.
the wandering tribe that plants the pole, and from that point out, they can map the world.
Mhm.
Axis Mundi.
Access Monday. So
So you've got that, but you've stuck it basically in the pleroma. And the pleroma has no boundaries, nothing. I mean, it's just, you're in a void. But you set up, you plant a pole and you say, okay, map everything from here. Well, you've already set up a map. In terms of that pole, you've got your culture and your rituals, so forth. If you're a little tribe, you've got your culture, your rituals, So, and then you act because within that pleroma. But you're on a raft. I mean, there's no solid ground anywhere. You've really made it up yourself. And so, the hardest part, I think, for people is you've got to look beyond constructs like space and time, because that's what
So the God image originates out of this need to go back to the pleroma then, and to get back to basic.
I
Shapelessness.
think it's the image you have, and an image is something that really is. Image is something to experience. You don't really, you can draw it out and so forth, but if you don't experience it, it's not really an image. It's a design, or it's a graph or something. But if it's something you experience, and through that experience, you connect to the aroma or to something larger, and very rarely are people going to connect to the aroma, or even with their God image. It's just, we fight it off. But if you connect, then you experience it. You don't think it. You don't.
Yeah,
have,
it comes through your experience.
Yeah.
So
Right.
a numinous experience.
Okay, so
Yeah. Yeah.
so
That's
Sean
creating your
says
God image.
one of the greatest
Well,
healing messages to
It's an
me
experience of, yeah.
is I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts when one surrenders to their soul. And so if
And
you
the soul is sort of the God image in a way.
right, and so when you surrender to your soul and do a painting based on that, something's flowing through you, then the fact that it touches other people is what Sean is saying is a healing message, I think. I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts when one surrenders to their soul. So when you do a painting and someone else reacts to it, then you're not alone in your experience.
Well, I don't do paintings for other people.
You only do them for yourself.
So when
understand.
I put stuff down, go ahead. I don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, that painting I showed you, I could show you again, but it's. I started out. I just wanted to do. I thought, I just want to do an ugly woman. I was getting a divorce. And I said, I'm going to think in terms of Picasso. And that's all I did. I just started making an image. And then I would go, well, what's this about? And I would keep asking myself, what's it about? Or what do I do next? And I never knew what I was doing. And I didn't, in a way, why care? What was the point? Nobody was telling me I had to do this damn thing. It was my own, I could just go poop on the canvas and who cares? So that's basically what I did for, about a year, I guess, and then.
Do you have it on your cell phone?
Yeah.
It's very similar to the process of how's it pronounced? Guernica?
Guernica, yeah.
Yeah.
Guernica. Picasso did about 12 drafts of that, and I didn't know this until I went to the museum in Madrid, that he had painted over the first draft, and he moved things around, moved elements around, and he kept painting over it and over it and over it. So it was like 12 or 13 drafts later, he had the final painting.
Right,
So
but it was
it's the
all on
same-
that one canvas.
It was all on the same canvas.
Yeah.
So if they did X-ray analysis, they would see all these layers under there.
And there's some very interesting other Picassos where he's
doing that.
where he's done that, where the painting is completely different.
Yeah, it
From-
looks completely different.
Yeah, I mean, it's even on a different subject, right? And Debbie, do you have any comment about your painting experience?
This isn't the finished version, but it's almost finished. No.
Okay, Bill is going to share his painting with us, so.
So I started with this figure here on the right. And then the basic idea I realized was that his reaching across, she made a mirror out of it and reflected back this beautiful face where she really is. But anyway.
The persona.
Okay, so this is
Yeah.
Bill's painting. I wish I could share it with you better, but this is, I don't know if that focuses, but I hope it does. And
She wasn't really, but I mean, that was the way it felt.
No.
I had
Okay.
to make the separation, so.
Right. So there is a picture of a woman looking in a mirror here, but
That's not the version where she's grasping
so it's
the guy's neck.
the one here. There's the mirror there. I don't know if you can
I
see
do
that,
remember
but
that.
anyway, that's a sense of
She
it.
never-
There's
that
actually
never
a picture
happened.
in that mirror. Okay,
Never grasped
moving
this
on.
back.
No?
No.
Wow, where'd I get that?
He's reaching, it looks like he's grasping her neck, but he's reaching for the key behind her. So
Okay.
he's reaching for an ideal.
So there's a
That's the
couple
life
of
giving.
comments
So
here.
that's his problem.
Sean says there's a deep profundity of the soul being a singularity of a collective. And Grenade says singularity is inevitable. And I think the
I
ultimate
cleaned it up a bit.
It's so cool. I love it.
I think the ultimate fate is to become the God that creates itself in the distant future. At least that would be cool. Then hit the reset button and do it again. That would be AI, I think.
Isn't that part of the God image reboot? Isn't reboot not part of
Yeah, I think that might be fair enough. In other words, when I was 40 and I'm sitting there in the dark on my 40th birthday playing the recorder, that was sort of trying to, not consciously, but in effect, the effect of it was I was trying to pull up
Bouncing around.
a reboot of the God image to have some other direction to go in my life. And after that, I did do a lot of stuff. I mean, I founded a public company after that, and I did a lot of other stuff. I founded a public company, made $1 million, and lost $1 million. You know, that's special. Not everybody can do that.
Well, what goes up must come down.
Yeah, I suppose.
But it's safety, isn't it, too? The God image must be safety. I mean, as well as reboot, it must be your hiding place. And also, I love what your commentator said there before about you are not alone. I think the God image is a projection of also self-help. I am not alone. I have myself.
Well, the God image is coming. The God image isn't projected, though.
Lovely or lonely?
Lovely. Lovely some days, I guess.
John, your comments on these topics?
Well, I tend to look at the desert as a positive thing. I tend to look at the desert as a place to
It's
escape, to escape to. So for me, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful image, and I'm reminded of Lawrence of Arabia, where they said, "What do you think? What does the desert mean to you?" And he said, "Well, it's clean." So I've been in deserts before, and yeah, they can be harsh, but there's always cool water somewhere, and there's a shade, you know, and
Well, I always loved Lawrence of Arabia, and I didn't know why. I mean, the first time I saw it, I was in 10th grade, and I saw it at the Bill Chickering Theater in Naval Housing Activity, Yokohama. That's where I saw it. Okay. Just give it a second to come back. Okay, so I remember that night seeing Lawrence of Arabia and going out into the street on my way home, and I'm in Japan, and it's 16 years after World War II. Okay, that's when it was. And it was dark. And I came upon the Cathedral of Yokohama, and it was still in rubble at that point. And so I have this connection between Lawrence of Arabia and the Cathedral of Yokohama. And then in my life, 15 years or so later, maybe it was longer, maybe 30 years, let's see, what years was it? Okay, so that was 62, and this was 2000, so we're talking about 38 years later, or 40 years later, because it was 2002, I actually lived it. I actually lived practically everything that happened to Lawrence in the 7 Pillars of Wisdom. Okay, in other words, I went to Saudi Arabia 23 times. I wore Saudi attire like Lawrence did.
Did you blow up some railway lines too?
Well, I didn't blow up any railway lines because we didn't have we didn't have any we didn't have a war going on at that time. But
Set
it was
fire to a few wells, but
yeah, it was right after 9/11 though, and it was we were blowing up hidebound ideas because among other things, I was telling hospital staffs in Saudi Arabia that I'm going to do your medical transcription. You're going to dictate it into this machine. I'm going to send it to the United States and then to India, where it's going to be typed. It's coming back to the United States where we're going to edit it, and then we're going to send it back to you in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
That was sort of revolutionary idea. But nonetheless, we did it, and so
That's impressive, Skip.
it was impressive. It truly, and it is impressive. I mean, because still those things are being done, and we were the ones that proved that it could be done. So, if you can imagine it, you can build it, right? That's the key. Okay. What does it mean to see a dancer in a dream? Could it be the lover in my or my own anima? This is from Corey. More specifically, a cloth dancer, her arms and legs held by a white cloth.
is that a male or female? Or
I don't know. And I don't know what the dancer is, but what would you imagine? Is it my own anima, so he must be a man? Corey must be talking about his anima. What does it mean to see a dancer in his dream? Well, I would say that it certainly is your anima, Corey, and whether it's a physical lover or not, that's something that you have to reflect upon. That's the depth psychology
And it's
answer.
the troubling. It's something that's on their mind. The fact they've asked the question, the fact they remember the image.
Well, and the fact that it's in a dream, okay? Because what are your dreams? What are your visions? They are your unconscious, your 2 million-year-old man. It's actually a 3.5 billion-year-old man, or woman, who is conveying to you something you need to know right now. Okay, so if you don't get a dream down, if you don't write it down, tomorrow it doesn't matter because it was reacting to you right then, to your psyche right then. And so what I say is that the self is this 3.5 billion-year-old man, which is the deep unconscious. It's the deepest image in the unconscious, the deepest archetype in the unconscious. And it has kept you alive for 3.5 billion years. Okay, since your grandparent was a single cell organism. And since that time, every one of your grandparents has successfully reproduced in that whole chain going back to the very beginning of life. And that part of your psyche is the God image, and it is what has kept you alive for 3.5 billion years. Your spirit, the spirit that is coming through you now. And so if it's giving you an image now, that's how it learned to communicate, because it learned to communicate long before we developed language or developed written language or anything like that. I mean, only Nebuchadnezzar, which was only like 2,500 years ago, which is nothing, saw the writing on the wall, right? But before that time, there was no writing. So your self has to communicate to you in images, And the way it does that is through dreams and visions. And so if you have a dream about a dancer, chances are that's about your anima or animus.
Yeah, but it's also because, there's no way to know what's going on with that, except if I were to dream of a dancer, I would think I think of a release of energy of some sort that's also kind of a structured energy, but I don't know what kind of dance this image is doing. So I don't know if it's flinging and happy or waving one hand in the air, or if it's like a dirge or something.
Okay, well, this says her arms and legs are held up by a white cloth. Held up by a white cloth.
She's
Almost like a puppet.
Yeah.
Well, then it sounds like that would almost sound like the energy's being faked. There's something fake going on, but there's no way to know.
Or being controlled.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes,
the point is nothing we can say,
Yeah, there you
Corey.
go.
The point is nothing we can say, Corey, has any meaning.
Definitive.
Because you have to reflect upon the image yourself, because this is yourself that's giving you that image. And so we can't say anything. I mean, we had this exercise with Albert where I read what the symbol ni means, and so this book of symbols that Taschen published, right, has all these Jungian meanings. Okay, there were, I don't know, 100 Jungian analysts that went through and took everything that's in the physical world, a knee, a spider, you name it, and explained what these images mean in an archetypal sense, and yet none of them had it right for me. Because, and you recall, 3 years ago, I read the definition of knee in that book, and none of them touched Albert. And Albert was being taken away by Nazis.
What you have to do is you have to take whatever the image is and see what it means to you.
Yes.
Like to me, dancing is a structured release of energy. And then I go from there and I see how is the dance happening, is there exuberance? Is there, like you say, is someone controlling it? Yeah. Is it a free dance, or is it a dance that's being frustrated by this white cloth or whatever's holding it up?
Right.
Or is it,
But are you?
maybe you're getting married and you don't want to get married, so you're faking it. So.
Yeah.
Are you able, though? Also, it's nice that you've got this sense that when you see a dancer, there's an energy outflow, whether it be controlled by somebody else or it's you, it's your animal. I mean, it's exciting that you have this. But at the same time, are you able to say, well, I might be totally wrong?
Oh,
To
absolutely.
come from a more poetic kind of thing is, I wonder if it's actually completely the opposite of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it could be that.
Depends on the context of the person's experience.
I was trying to say that I have no idea what's going on with that person.
That's right. We have no idea what's going on with Corey.
So for me, just imagine a release of energy.
Okay, so Sean asked, could one of the dependencies be fear, if not light, to be the sleeping half of the God image? This conclusion resonates with me in correlation to active imagination, a relation to visions. So does that mean anything to you?
I didn't catch the first part.
Okay. Could one of the dependencies be fear?
Which dependency?
I'm not sure what dependencies you mean, Sean, but I think I get it. But let's go around the room.
A fundamental
Okay,
dependency.
you said look up, so let me say.
Fear.
Do you think in a
In the
sense?
dream?
So here's what he said earlier. Do you think in a sense a vision depends on light, because without light we cannot see? If not, what dependencies might occur?
Well, you can hear visions.
Yeah,
Feel
you can.
visions. You can smell visions.
Right. Okay. So when Dr. Jung talks about imagery, he's not necessarily talking about a picture. He's talking about a psychological image. Like, if I mention a piece, you will have an image of it, and it won't be a picture, but you know what the piece sounds like. So if I mention the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, everybody has an image of Fifth Symphony, da 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 da, or Beethoven's Ninth Century, da 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 da. I'm off key, but anyway, I have an image of the Ninth Symphony, or the Third Symphony, which is very lyrical, right?
But I want to go back. I do see that one of the dependencies of our life could be fear. I think it's very common in analysis for patients to go to people and say, I'm acting out on all these things, I'm causing myself fearful, anxious moments. And why is it? Because so many times in childhood or other times, people from terrible situations in which they fear have been saved or relieved in some way, been released from fear in some way. There's a comfort in that. And so you can get this perverse attachment, even dependency, I think, on fear. Because at the end of fear generally happens release.
That you're saved.
Yes.
And this is what the God image is in the collective, which is that our society will save you in theory. I mean,
Oh God.
pardon?
I'm worried now.
Well, no, I mean, look,
Donald.
an airplane crashed in Jacksonville, Florida the other day, okay? And there were, all these people on the plane, 53 people or whatever it was, and they were all saved. And, okay, it wasn't a crash, but it was...
And then there's Russia.
Yes.
Right, okay, so in Jacksonville, society provided emergency vehicles and methodologies and practice saving people. So,
Good luck.
well, and then there's good luck, okay? There's no accounting for pure luck, right? Random.
But there's a lot of engineering behind all of that, you're right.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
engineering, and so the collective unconscious, which is society, which is civilization, will save you if it can. Okay, now in Russia, I don't think people could be saved in that situation because the plane was on
Because they
fire.
were trying to get their luggage out of the overhead
Is
compartments.
that what it was?
Is that right?
They couldn't get off. People were going, why don't we get my stuff out?
No kidding.
That's what my son told me. I didn't,
Oh my goodness. Well, so what is the collective unconscious, and how is it different in the U.S. and Russia? So, in the U.S. we have the Sully Sullenberger event in the Hudson River, where everybody escaped, and it wasn't people grabbing stuff off their
Yeah,
luggage.
I don't know what the collective unconscious has to do with that. And I think
Well, the collective unconscious-
is going to be the same. That's what you're.
It's the collective knowledge base you're talking about in terms of engineering, isn't it?
Oh, I'm not talking.
Well,
about
management as
that.
well.
I'm talking about
My connection. So
For C, I think so.
I mean, it's just incredible how much infrastructure there is in terms of documents just to run the FAA,
Sure.
where I work.
right. So the collective unconscious is actually millions of people and millions of man hours that have gone into producing that
Well,
airplane.
that's not the collective
That's the
unconscious.
collective conscious.
Yeah,
Knowledge.
Yeah, that's knowledge.
Knowledge is not unconscious.
But it's unconscious to you. You rely on it.
Well, it's not if I don't know anything about it. If you're born if you're born in
You have
human
faith.
species, you've got an unconscious that's common to everyone, basically.
Right,
But
okay.
if you've been to engineering school and I've been to art school, I don't have engineering unconscious anything.
No,
You know.
no, but what?
But your
But you,
art appears,
I've got an unconscious coloration that you have no, access to.
but your art appears in the airports to make the journey pleasant, so it's all integrated.
Well, then I go shoot myself.
Yeah, but-
If that's what my goal in life were.
But isn't the collective unconscious? And this is
That's designed.
this is an honest question.
Yeah.
Isn't the collective unconscious our ability to not be conscious physically of what goes into an airplane? I mean, Dr. Jung said that God or the God image is the unconscious. Conscious. So our personal God image is God within us. The collective unconscious is God proper.
All right, well, if collective unconscious means our knowledge base, our
Well,
culture.
it includes our knowledge base, does not mean it includes it.
Well,
Right.
there's a
Yes,
difference
I
between
agree
the
with you.
unconscious, the way he's saying it, there's the collective unconscious and then there's the unconscious. The unconscious to me is like what he's referring to, well, is represented by the God image, because we can never be fully, you can only have access to the unconscious via the God image. So, I think,
I think
I
it's,
back off, I don't know which we're
it's the
talking
sum of our knowledge and the sum of our what we don't have.
For a long time, what is the difference between the collective conscious and the collective unconscious?
Well, to me, the collective conscious is all of what, is contained within the libraries, within the heads of all the people that are operating and living in the world. And the collective unconscious is all that exceeds all of that and is species-wide.
Well, let me, and Dr. Jung was talking about a deep archetype in the point, an intermediate point between our personal unconscious and whatever the collective unconscious is for all human beings, right? But there's a societal unconscious. And so, for example, okay, I had this kind of epiphany that happened to me a couple of years back, where I was driving from near Boston, Massachusetts to here overnight. So I arrived home at like 5 in the morning, so it was dark the whole way. So I have headlights coming toward me and taillights going away from me. And looking at the line of cars, it's like they're on rails, okay? And it's like the hand of God is making that happen and keeping us safe, even across the George Washington Bridge. And we crossed the George Washington Bridge, and even though there's traffic coming from everywhere and there's all kinds of entrances and exits and you name it around that area, still everybody was doing their part to make the collective work. Okay, and so I sort of saw that as kind of the hand of God and the God image in this sense. I'm not sure whether you concur, but you don't concur. No.
That's level 3 consciousness.
Okay, so that's all right. So, all right. So fair enough. So let's talk about the stages of consciousness.
No, that's just, I don't even know if I remember them.
Okay, I
basically-
remember them. So let's
Yeah.
talk about the stages of consciousness.
Excuse us, we're gonna have to go.
Okay.
Oh, you are?
Good to
Okay.
see you.
Good to see you.
Peace. Take care. Thank you for coming. We'll see you
Yes.
next month, first
Yeah.
Monday in June,
Yes,
right?
take care.
Hopefully the first Monday in June.
Some great notes.
I expect to see some real bulk on you.
Oh,
buddy.
yeah.
Yeah, you
Especially the
you've
Oh, sure.
thinned out since
You
the
look like
broken
you lost a
arm,
bit.
so,
Yeah,
Share them with the one you're
Yeah.
talking
it's
about.
hard to eat anything.
yeah.
I tend to forget what we say.
Oh, I know, that's why I take notes.
Oh, that's so good.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Okay,
See you all later.
so, where were we?
The stages of consciousness, which are interesting.
Okay, so the first stage is participation mystique. In other words, we're born as wild animals. We have instincts, and we just go with the flow. Okay, that's a
We're
primitive.
the universe.
Pardon?
We're the
universe. We're the kings and queens, right?
We're not even separated out yet.
We're not separated
we are
out.
The universe.
We are the universe,
So you're
right?
talking about reflex.
Well, primitives. I mean,
We're talking about no consciousness at all. You're just
Right.
totally immersed. If you're thirsty,
Mechanical.
suck on the tip.
It's a mechanism.
Mom supplies everything. You don't have to differentiate all this sense of separation early on.
Right. Shit.
And the first word you learn is bitch.
This is it. Let me let this reconnect for a second. Okay. It's amazing. Okay, so the second level is projecting on your parents as if they're gods. Okay, so mom is a god, dad is a god, dad is the best dad in the world, mom is the best mom in the world. She's
Omniscient, omnipotent.
omniscient, omnipotent, that sort of thing. So that's the second level of consciousness. Third level of consciousness is projecting that godness, okay, because when you get into teenage years, mom and dad aren't right anymore. And so something has to be God. And so that's projected on the church or on an organization, the Boy Scouts or the Marine Corps or government, some ism like the gang, that sort of thing. So that's the third level. The fourth level, what Stein defines in...
Also, the third level, I remember there's a personal God sort of thing.
Right.
It's the level at which churches don't want you to go beyond, because the fourth level gets tricky.
Yeah, so the fourth level is emptiness, okay? Realizing that the modern man, the fact that there's emptiness in
The core.
in the core, right? And this is where St. Nicholas of Cusa comes along, okay? Because Nicholas of Cusa, who was the patron saint of Switzerland, saw through to that level and realized that all these projections that religions put out, there's nothing there in the physical world. It's empty, okay? And that's when you have to realize that God is not out there, okay? But first you realize God is not out there, okay? So, and that's an emptiness, okay? So that's a fourth level of consciousness, and that's modernity, and that's where we are for most people, okay? Many agnostics and atheists, they're out there, and they can't understand what religion is about. They don't appreciate it, and they say all these miracles are untrue, blah, 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 blah. There can't be a virgin birth, that sort of thing.
But I would argue that most Americans I know, and maybe, right, let me take that word out. Most people I know are at stage 3.
Yes.
Still have a personal God, still deify whatever football team, whatever thing that, floats their boat, and don't give a damn about anything else.
That's it. That's
They don't want to go any further. So most people,
The modern man is the educated.
yeah, you say modern man, but I think most people I know
Right.
are still at stage 3.
They want to stay at
They're
stage
medieval.
3.
They're almost
And
medieval.
they're almost medieval, and they're afraid to go on to stage 4 and stage 5. Okay, so stage 4 is realizing, oh, well, all these myths, and this is what's happened in the last 500 years, culminating in Nietzsche, okay, where God is dead. Okay, God is dead because all these,
Enlightenment.
Pardon?
The Enlightenment.
the so-called enlightenment, okay, Buddhists wouldn't accept that as enlightenment, but nonetheless,
Well, the rationality.
rationality says, oh, there's nothing there, okay, and so that's emptiness. So Nicholas of Cusa went around Zurich for years, or Saxon, or wherever he was from, and he had this grimace on his face because he realized he reached that level of consciousness, and he realized, but then over the whole, he put the Trinity. Okay, so now this is postmodernism. Okay, this is stage 5, and stage 5 says that, right, God isn't out there. Okay, God is in here. Okay, God is in the psyche. It's part of the psyche. It's the God image. And saying nothing, I mean, I'm talking psychologically because this is a Jungian group, but saying nothing about the metaphysical God, but there is a God that's within us that drives us, whatever that is. Most Americans are driven by materialism, and they get to the point, I keep showing this picture of this yacht, which is named Never Enough, okay? Well, that's a modern person that owns that yacht because it's sitting at the dock, it's empty, and it says never enough because he never goes out on the Chesapeake Bay, and we say, we need a bigger boat, right? Immediately. And so what we have isn't enough materially, okay? And so materialism doesn't provide enough because whatever you get, you want more. And of course, we have the king of materialism as president of the United States right now. And has he found happiness? No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that can convince me that that man is happy,
No,
including him.
But his people who deify him and reify him, I mean, not like you who reify him, but the people who truly see him as the king of whatever, are happy. They continue to be his core group, his core supporters, and whatever happens there.
Okay, so they're at the,
They're projecting an image onto him, and they're very content
No,
about
I
that.
don't know. I don't know if
well,
consensus-
they're still at stage
It's-
3.
Yeah, but it's like you're happy because someone else is unhappy. Yeah, it's sort of like
Yeah, it's a zero-sum
I'm up because you're
game.
down.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's still the,
I don't
that's
know
still,
if that can actually be contentment or even happiness. It's almost like spite.
yeah, and that's
That
the,
doesn't
that's
sound
still the
healthy.
third level, because you can project on material things.
So what's the 6th level?
Well, we haven't gotten to the 5th level yet. Okay, so the 4th level is emptiness, which is realizing, oh, by the way, that tower that you have in Manhattan, that hasn't made you happy. Oh, by the way, this beautiful wife, trophy wife that you have in the White House, she hasn't made you happy. Oh, by the way, your
But
president.
happiness isn't necessarily the goal. So don't.
You're still going
Well,
down.
maybe.
I think.
Yeah, you have to have an experience of God.
You have to know God
Right.
through the experience of God, not
Right.
through the mentors.
Right.
And that's not the same as having a personal God.
No, no, because that God's still outside you.
Right, so the personal God is a projection of a God image.
Right.
Yeah. Or,
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
I guess
And
if
so
you even
the,
get that far,
this
I think.
5th level is a religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have religious experiences all the time, almost daily.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so I'm with Dr. Jung, who says I have no need to believe, I know. Okay,
Exactly.
and so that's definitely this 5th level. Okay, so then the 6th level. Okay, so you're happy with the 5th
I
level?
am, and I think
Okay.
I'm there.
Okay, and so then the 6th level is this level of synchronicity, which is this acausal connecting principle. Okay, which goes back to what Michio Kaku says. He's a cosmologist who's very popular on television right now. He's a physicist and astronomer. He says every atom in the universe is connected to every other atom in the universe. And
See, that's already silly talk.
pardon? That's already silly. What?
It's already silly talk, but you know. It's,
Why is it silly?
because those are all constructs.
Atoms, you mean, the point of calling that?
Well, yeah, they're constructs, but they're ways that we human
It's
beings.
it's like metaphors we use to navigate. But, it's our axis mundi.
Right, it is our axis mundi, but we have to have some way of thinking about these things, right?
I guess.
And the issue with the scientific method, the issue with scientific method is you have to have a causal connection, right? Cause and effect.
Well, no, I don't know. If you're talking field dynamics, you don't find causal connections. You might say, it might be statistics. It might be, it might be.
What are you saying statistics is?
It's not causal.
Okay, it's average.
Yeah.
Well, even that's not right. And when I'm talking field dynamics, you're talking about not being able to define everything. So you are, in a way, you're dealing with statistics because you're looking for close approximation.
Right, because there are various levels of understanding. So if we understand things at the atomic level, I mean, somebody said that, if an alien came to this world and they saw us, they would just think of us as colonies of many
Causality
living
and
beings.
logic are all functions of language. They're functions of the tools we use.
Right.
So that
So they're all at different levels.
it's almost tautological. I mean,
Right.
we're saying it's true because it's logical. Well, it's logical because you're using language. So
Well, we're using logos, and anytime we use logos,
it's sort of like saying, well, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that I'm always, as usual, excited by your viewpoint, but I don't think that most people are attracted to the notion that randomness and the unexpectedness
Even Einstein.
is a thing to be cherished, embraced, make my axis mundi randomness.
Well, I don't really think I just said that, but, because I think if you have a God image, you've already got your axis mundi in the most cosmological sense.
But the welcoming or the embrace of what you're saying is the important. Skip was saying everybody needs a way of looking at things, and you're saying no, they don't.
I'm saying not necessarily, because you don't have. There comes a point where you're back at square one, and you're in the participation mystique.
precisely, and so
you don't need a point
so
of view
there's
anymore.
nobody. Yeah, so there's nobody that's a Beethoven, and we can't go back and recreate a Beethoven.
Well,
right?
but
He
Beethoven found that space within which.
There's a theology of Beethoven that has shaped our image of who Beethoven is now.
But if all
200 years
you've
of
heard is his
experience.
music,
Right.
you don't know anything else. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
Then the
all we
difference-
really know of Beethoven is his music. You're right.
well, some of us know more,
But
but
our
I don't.
interpretation and our layering it with bunches of meanings, and who knows where the meanings. Like Corey's question before, asking, what is the meaning of my dream? I think Beethoven would be real surprised to find out what some people have said is the meaning of his Fifth Symphony.
But I think
Oh,
any
surely.
artist that shows their work on
Surely.
Saturday afternoon at a local,
Yeah.
they're surprised at
I mean,
what
who-
people see in it. You
Yeah.
submit your stuff to a juried exhibition and you go, oh my God, they picked those and they threw those in at the last minute. I couldn't believe it. I just needed something to pad my. That's the ones they like.
It's sure that Beethoven didn't predict that the letter V would be da 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 in Morse code. Right? And okay, so let me just cover the other two stages. The sixth stage is synchronicity, which we could talk about separately because that's a whole huge topic. The seventh, according to Stein, is in this book, C.G. Jung, Kundalini Yoga. Okay, so this is
Did Jung
Jung's.
write that?
Yeah,
I had never heard of that.
okay, Kundalini. And so Jung believed that we, that Westerners maybe can't get to the seventh level, but he acknowledged that some people in the East, particularly in India, where yoga is very powerful, had possibly reached a seventh level of consciousness. And apparently it's described in this book, C.G. Jung Kundalini Yoga. Now, I always thought that this was sort of an extraneous book, so I never paid any attention to it, but I went back and looked at at Stein's book about Jung's map of the soul, and he mentions this and says this is the seventh level of consciousness. So,
So how was it there when you?
I haven't read it yet. I bought it. Finally, after 32 years, I finally bought it. And I'm going to read it in the coming month. And so,
Does your wife? She hasn't read it, but don't you think? She's a Buddhist, though.
right, she's a Buddhist.
I
So, well, she's,
find us a Hindu.
yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting thing because the Buddhists are into the Logos also, and they're into enlightenment. And so in Buddhism, you'll have many different elements of one idea looked at from every different possible example. So today I was in meditation class and we were talking about the 5 of this and the 60 different slices and dices of something else. Okay, but that's all logos. And today I got the Tibetan Buddhist Lama to admit that those are nothing about enlightenment, that you have to have the experience to have enlightenment. Okay, you have to have the experience. And once you have the experience, you don't have to go back to the 60 empty
Well, I often
phrases.
think those guys sometimes put all sorts of hurdles there so that people have something to do, hoping
Yes.
that they'll reach enlightenment somewhere along the way, and if not, oh well.
Yeah, well,
You
that-
tried, buddy. Here's a
Yeah,
star.
but meanwhile, you gave me money. You gave me
Yeah.
food for
That's
my
right.
begging bowl.
Kundalini
It's
is,
organized religion.
yeah.
Right.
Kundalini, I don't remember much about except that there's the nodes, whatever they're called, the chakras.
Yeah, chakras. Yeah.
Skip, I believe you have had the enlightenment. I believe you have had the experience.
I have had many religious experiences, many, and therefore, when I saw Jung's video where he's asked whether he believes in God, and he says, "I have no need to believe. I know." And I had this epiphany, and I said, "Oh my God, I know too. But what do I know? I mean, what did he know that I know?" And I had to spend a decade working it out before I could get it. And I realized that you have to have at this fifth stage of consciousness, you have to have this religious experience. Once you have it, then it doesn't matter the creed. Now, so I'm going to these Buddhist meditation classes mainly because I think meditation is a way to communicate with my unconscious, and so I want to hear that. Today what the Lama does is pass around the book and have us read paragraph by paragraph about the Buddha nature. And so I got assigned this paragraph that was talking about the 5 of this and the 60 of that, and I had to giggle. I giggled because I said, "Oh my God, this is the logos."
Yeah.
of Christianity,
Yeah.
where the word, as I sometimes say on other live feeds, the Bible is just a black doorstop, okay, that has no meaning whatsoever unless you put life in.
And
Well-
the nice thing about a black doorstop is it holds the door open.
Well, okay, it holds it. That's right. That's fair enough. Okay, so it holds the door open.
Oh, I know
And,
what you mean.
so now I understand the metaphor, which is the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? So what's the tree of life, Bill? What is the tree of life, metaphorically?
Tree of life. Wow. Let's talk about switching gears left and right here. Tree of knowledge is is actually what God didn't want anybody to touch, according to the Bible, because then you would know, then you would be enlightened, actually. And the
You would
tree
have
of-
consciousness.
Yeah, and then the tree of life is the, gosh, I normally have this under control, but
Okay,
but it's the.
let me offer a suggestion.
Tree of life is life. It's the God, what is it? It's okay. The tree of life is feminine. The tree of knowledge is masculine in a sense, because the tree of life is what pulls you into manifest world, and the tree of knowledge is what allows you to escape. God doesn't want you. The serpent didn't want you to know that. Well, according
No,
to
the
which
serpent-
version,
yeah.
there's so many versions of where the serpent's either good, bad, or indifferent. But the serpent wants to trick Eve into giving the knowledge, and God says no, no, no. But that's Yahweh, which is not exactly God. That's So I have a real mixed up sense of what all that is about.
Well, all Christianity is mixed up because they
Yeah.
use both the Old Testament and the
There's
New
also two
Testament.
versions of Genesis right there in the book.
Right. Okay. So, I say that the tree of life is women. Okay.
I did that.
Yeah, you sort of said that. Okay. The tree of life is the
It's
feminine,
what pulls you into the manifest world.
and it creates you manifestly. And without women, we're nothing. Okay. And so that's the tree of life, and the tree knowledge of good and evil. Okay, I agree with you. That's the
Well,
logos.
Sophia, she was feminine, and she was the creatrix.
Right.
That is where all creation comes from
Right.
the feminine. But what is the feminine but a reflection of this radiant energy? And if there was only the sun, there would be nothing but a light, right?
Right.
You wouldn't know the sun existed unless you somehow managed to be separate from it and look at it, and you go, oh, there's a blinding light. But if
Right.
there were no reflections anywhere, you wouldn't know that anything else existed.
Right.
So Sophia is the moon. She reflects.
Right.
She's the feminine.
Right.
And so you
and
can't
so
have creation. You can't have the cosmos without that initial duality.
Right. So for off-site viewers, Bill is talking about Proverbs 8:12 through 31. Okay, which is that's the biblical passage in which Sophia describes herself. I didn't bring a Bible tonight, so I can't read it to you. But
Just like Jung, he knows the Bible.
but if you go to Proverbs 8, verses 12 through 31, you will find Sophia's self-description, okay, which was existing long before the New Testament came along,
But
right?
long after the Gnostics.
No, Gnostics were after Christ.
No, they weren't. They were before Christ.
No.
Yeah, they were.
When did they start then?
Uh,
You know
it was-
better
it
than
was-
I do.
It was 6 p.m. July in 2012 BC.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
There's a whole tradition. It comes out of Egypt that precedes Jesus and all of that.
Right.
And
Okay.
Jesus fit in, just like
Right, and so did
Everybody modified.
Maria Prophetessa, right? And so, am I enlightened? Oh my God, I don't think so, but
It's interesting because I'm still stuck, Bill, Skip and Bill, in a Christian paradigm where I still think the point of the tree of life, and it's interesting that the snake would want me to avoid it. I still see it from the New Testament view, that it's the cross, and the whole point of the cross is life isn't what you think it is.
yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
There's
Right.
more to life than
Right.
you know.
I mean, Jung said the definition of the cross or crucifixion is wholeness. Okay, that if you, okay, I happen to have it here. I've read it earlier today, but I can read it again.
Please do.
Okay, so he says, although all this sounds as if it were a sort of theological speculation, it is in reality modern man's perplexity expressed in symbolic terms. It is the problem I so often had to deal with in treating the neuroses of intelligent patients. It can be expressed in a more scientific, psychological language. For instance, instead of using the term God, you say unconscious. Instead of Christ, self. Instead of incarnation, integration of the unconscious. Instead of salvation or redemption, individuation. And instead of crucifixion or sacrifice on the cross, realization of the four functions or of wholeness. I think it is no disadvantage to religious tradition if we can see how far it coincides with psychological experience. On the contrary, it seems to me a most welcome aid in understanding religious tradition. And so I've been reading from this book, The New God Image by Edward Edinger, page 187, and that was a letter to David Cox, which I've read all 14 letters from this book into the YouTube channel, and you can find them under Blunt Psychiatrist versus Theologians.
Carl Jung wrote that letter.
He wrote 14 letters, which Dr. Edinger described the implications of in this book, the New God Image. So what else? We've got 2 minutes.
Do you think it's a good idea to write down our dreams in the morning?
Definitely, definitely, because our dreams are messages to us from our unconscious, and our unconscious doesn't do anything wasteful. Okay, our unconscious is replenishing all of our cells every 7 years. Our unconscious is making your heart beat 72 times a minute. Our unconscious is making you breathe 12 times a minute. And your unconscious is doing everything that your body needs. And so the communication from your unconscious, which comes in the form of dreams and visions, is important from your unconscious point of view, from the point of view of the self, of the unconscious. And so it's very important to pay attention to your dreams and visions, because those are messages to you, and that you need to try to understand if you can and reflect upon. It doesn't mean you can buy dreams and have it tell you anything, okay? Because I've got that big book of symbols from Taschen, and it never hits. Okay, because every person, as Bill is saying, what is it? Unus mundus, you're a stake in the ground. Every axis mundi, every one of us is a universe unto himself. And
Point of
so,
reference is basically what it is.
right, and so we all emanate out from here, and so we have to understand conscious based on the images it has is trying to communicate with us. It's like a game of charades, and basically because our unconscious didn't have written language.
See, implicit in all that you're saying is that our unconscious is trying to get us to go the way of individuation.
Right.
And it gets there by way of compensation. So if you get off to this side of the road a little bit, you might have a dream that'll compensate that and pull you
Back toward the center.
towards the center.
Right.
And there seems to be this inherent growth thing going on that who can explain that?
Yeah.
So we don't need to put the date on there. The date is irrelevant.
Well, it's relevant to me.
No, it's relevant because
Because I
your
can think
dream is reacting to you right now.
You
Okay.
can look at it
Or-
and you go, you know, at that time I was packing to go to Europe, and my dog it bit a neighbor, and you know, you put all these things together, you go, oh, that dream makes sense now. Where you could-
What about keeping a journal?
Oh, you have to keep a journal because your unconscious may be giving you a series of dreams that flow
But
together
there's a
to
lot
give
of
you
different
meaning.
ways to do a journal.
Right.
I have my own way, which is pretty piecemeal. You know, I don't have this black book that I write things in. Well, actually, I do. But that's my calendar book. I write things in there. But I also have just pages and pages of stuff. But I always put the date on it. So I figure if I go back to it at some point, I can always, you know, organize it if I want to. But I never do. But
Yeah.
I write it out, and getting it written out to me is the most important thing, because oftentimes that translates into something else I write out over here and something else.
Right. And often I find
I gotta go.
I find myself giggling because I say, tell me something I don't know. Right. Because it's telling me you got to change. And I'm saying, okay, yeah, I know that. I'm already conscious of it. But your psyche, as Bill says, is compensating and trying to bring you down the safe path, because it's your psyche, your 3.5 billion year old man who's kept you alive to this point from the beginning. From that single celled organism to today, you're alive because of that. Okay, but it doesn't have to live in the 21st century, you do. So you need to have an ego that can analyze what is right and what is wrong. I need to terminate at this point. I apologize, but they're shutting down the lights here, so we have to terminate and leave. But thank you very much for joining us tonight. I hope that's useful. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the chats, but I'll try to get to them